Welcome to The Fully Mindful, where we explore what it means to live with intention, creativity, authenticity, and connection. I'm your host, Melissa Chareau, mindfulness and breathwork facilitator, neurodivergent lawyer and coach, and fellow human navigating this wild and beautiful ride we call life. On this podcast, we dive deep with interviews featuring inspiring guests, share solo mini episodes packed with guided mindfulness practices to help you center and thrive, and mix things up with tangents and sidebars, where my friend and fellow podcaster Debbie Harrell from the New World Normal joins me for some real, random, and meaningful conversations. So if you're ready to pause, reflect, and expand, you're in the right place. Let's get fully mindful.
So on one hand, being a heart attack survivor, I gained what I like to call survivor superpowers: greater gratitude, greater appreciation, greater sense of being in the moment, so much gratitude for my family, for my friends, for my community. Just was this power, this thing that was just so powerful inside of me. There was an awakening or something. Concurrent to that, on the other hand, here I had learned about my ethnicity. I met my biological family. I discovered holes I never knew I had within my soul and in my heart were being filled by virtue of just meeting my biological family and having these really warm, receptive, and embracing relationships all pretty much right out of the gates. That just gave me, so I'm feeling like a new person on both sides of this, the survivor superpowers and having my biological family in my life who embrace me. That's how I landed on this podcast, the sense of profound awesomeness.
So a couple of months ago, somebody reached out to me to be interviewed, and that happens. It's unusual that it is somebody as interesting as the person you're going to hear from today, Adrian Jones. And what's really crazy about this story is that Adrian contacted me from where he's currently living in Marin County, California, which is where I grew up, and evidently also where he has this super crazy story about almost dying of a widowmaker heart attack and then miraculously surviving that heart attack to get an incredible clarity about his life and his purpose in life. He also had incredible clarity about needing to meet his biological parents. And I don't even want to give away any of the juicy bits here, but this is one of the most incredible stories about the universe really listening to us. And really, if we are just present for even a tiny little infinitesimal piece of it, we are in for a huge ride of our lives. And that's exactly what happened here with Adrian Jones. He is wildly, incredibly interesting and also very down to earth. And I think you're going to love this conversation with me and Adrian Jones on surviving a widowmaker heart attack and finding one's purpose in life. Well, hello, everybody. This is Melissa with The Fully Mindful. I'm excited to be here today with Adrian Jones, who is a financial services veteran, and he is also a podcast host. He's podcast host of the Profound Awesomeness podcast, which doesn't that have an awesome title? He survived a widowmaker heart attack, which we're definitely going to be talking about, in the fall of 2016. And really, he has this incredible story about what happened there and what his life is like now and how that has catapulted him forward into, I think, things that he probably didn't even expect. And so I'm excited to have him here today to talk about how he found himself, how he found his purpose, and how he shares that with the world. So welcome, Adrian.
Hey, Melissa, thank you for having me on your show. I'm really excited to be here and to have this conversation.
Yeah, me too. And just for the listeners, it was fun. And I can't even remember how, but Adrian reached out to me, and that does happen from time to time when you're a podcaster. People reach out, and it's always exciting when they do. And And I remember you reached out and you're like, hey, I don't know if you want to hear from me, but here's my story. And I was like, oh my God, yes, I definitely need my listeners to hear from you because you have a really interesting and compelling story. And so, but it was a little bit, we've had some technical difficulties getting together. So I'm excited that we finally were able to arrive here today. And here's the other exciting thing for listeners. Adrian lives in kind of my home county of Marin County, California, right?
That's right. Been here. Well, I was born here, but grew up elsewhere, which we'll probably talk about. And I moved back to Marin County in 2006. It was a great place to raise kids. And now they're out of the house. We're empty nesters, but been here for a while and love it.
Yeah, and I think we're more or less in the same age group. So we probably would have known each other had you managed to stick around there when you were growing up.
Yeah, that would have been something, right?
Yeah, that would have been a funny coincidence. But I love it. My mother still lives there, and I still visit there. And for those who haven't been there, you should go there. It's just beautiful, isn't it?
Beautiful. If I remember correctly, roughly 80% of the county is protected open space,
Yeah.
which means there's plenty to explore, lots of trails, fire trails, single track trails, hiking trails. There's beauty abounds in Marin County, that's for sure.
I remember when I lived there, I volunteered for, oh gosh, I'm probably going to mess up the name just because it's been a couple of decades, but the Marin Conservation League. And they were responsible in large part for a lot of the open space there. And I remember one of the things that I probably took for granted when I lived there, but I don't anymore now that I live in Portland, Oregon, where this is not the case. There are no billboards littering the freeway in the way that they are here. There's a huge limitation.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So you just get to see, Mount Tamalpais, you get to see the protected marshlands, you get to see the bay, you get to see all these beautiful things there that, might be otherwise covered up with billboards and signs and advertisements.
It's funny you say that. After all these years, I've never thought of that, but you're spot on. I'm racking my brains to think of a billboard in the whole county, and I can't think of one.
Yeah, I don't think they're allowed there. So that's the little nugget there, starting off on a tangent. The listeners know me. I have ADHD, so that's what I do. When I see a shiny object that I'm interested in, I tend to go over there. So, so I guess maybe tell me, like, what's one of your favorite places to go in Marin County?
I love going to a lot of places. I think one of my favorite places is Tamales Bay, which is out towards the Pacific Ocean. I love West Marin, the drive out through the hills and the cattle ranches, getting out to all that open space that has a ton of protection around it, and to sit at Tamales Bay and have a picnic lunch and just watch the world go by for a little bit is one of my favorite things to do. And now that I think about it, Father's Day is coming up here in the not too distant future. And maybe I should put that on the docket for something we should do on Father's Day. Go back out there.
Yeah.
You can get a bushel of oysters and sit there and shuck oysters and enjoy a charcuterie plate and just watch the world. And it's just so beautiful out there.
It is fantastic. And so there's our plug for Marin County.
There it is.
They should be on our affiliate program, but they're not.
Absolutely. Not yet. You'll get them.
Not yet. But I mean, your story, it doesn't start in Marin County, but I mean, certainly like kind of take us back to when you left Marin County and what caused you to come back to Marin County.
So the first part of that's pretty easy. Born here many years ago. When I was 4, I grew up in San Francisco. And when I was 4, Dad took a job in Colorado. So we moved the family out there just outside Denver. Spent a fair number of years. That's where I did the formative growing up years were outside Denver, Colorado. Eventually, my parents moved to Massachusetts. I went to college in California and haven't really left. what brought me back to Marin County, I am a boomerang of sorts. My wife and I settled in San Francisco and started our family, and we started with a dog and then had a daughter, and then our son came along, and we just were bursting at the seams in the place we were living in San Francisco. So we started canvassing all around the greater San Francisco Bay Area, looking for neighborhoods and places to live. And we just found going over the Golden Gate Bridge and being closer to the wine country and to skiing and up in Tahoe made a ton of sense. And you're not too far from San Francisco when you live just over the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco. So that all brought us back here, and I'm sure our conversation will come back to Marin County later in our conversation, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, I want to talk about one of the things I don't want to bury the lead, but one of the remarkable things, you have many remarkable things about your story, is that you survived this widowmaker heart attack in 2016. And, for those who might not be familiar with what a widowmaker heart attack, tell us what that is and kind of what happened.
Yeah. So the widowmaker is a quote unquote affectionate term for your left anterior descending artery. It is the artery that brings the greatest amount of oxygenated blood into the heart. It is known as the widowmaker because if that artery becomes clogged for whatever reason, the chances of survival are very slim. And therefore, it's called the widowmaker. My heart attack took place. Here we are back in Marin County. I was mountain biking with 3 friends of mine when we were going up a decent ascent, nothing super duper strenuous, but we were climbing when all of a sudden I felt all the strength in my legs vanish in a snap of a finger. I couldn't have been any weaker, and I've been mountain biking with these friends on this exact trail a bunch of times, so I couldn't figure out what was going on. My friends rode ahead, and I labored to keep up with them with everything I had to ride my bike. They were waiting for me at a trail junction, and as I came up to the top part of the climb where they were waiting, the world started to spin in a terrifying and unsettling way. And it was all I could do to click out of my pedals and get off my bike. And I started to throw up on the side of the trail. Just got really nauseous. And I'm sorry for the TMI bomb, but I became violently ill and started throwing up all over. And my narrative in my brain was, A, you're a fat old man. You need to be in better shape. My other narrative that I had was, well, you know what? I think I have food poisoning, because the night before I'd taken my daughter out for sushi. So I thought, as I was sitting there getting really sick, that I must have food poisoning and drew the short straw of sashimi with a side of bacteria.
Well, right, because we don't normally think of heart attack to being associated with extreme nausea and violent vomiting. That's not, at least what, like, the average layperson doesn't think of that. We think of, the arm goes numb.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some of that, that lightheadedness, certainly, but the legs not working. And you were going up, if I remember correctly, up fish grade, perhaps. Is that
I wish I was going up fish grade. I was actually going up shaver grade.
Shaver grade, sorry.
I'm not fit enough for fish grade, but I was going up shaver grade, not quite as steep as fish grade, but steep enough. And it does take a bite out of you, no matter how strong a climber you are on your bike. It will take a bite out of you, and it certainly did me.
Yeah, and interesting too that there was that part of ourselves, that it's kind of the mean part of ourselves that jumped in right away. You're in the middle of having this heart attack, and it's like, you're a fat old man. There's something wrong or bad with you. You're the cause for this problem, Adrian, not the fact that you're having a heart attack, right? Fascinating that little gremlin managed to make its way in anyway.
Yeah. And I share that, and I'm glad you picked up on that, because I share that because I want people to know, if this happens to them, it could be a heart attack, and to not have the narrative that I had.
Yeah.
Because once I had purged all the contents out of my stomach, I sat down. I did feel a little bit better. I looked at my friends and said, let's keep riding.
Wow.
And to continue riding would be more climbing, but not very. The hardest part of the climb was over.
But isn't that fascinating that that you would do that? I'm going to say we, because I could imagine myself doing that too. That even though you didn't know that you were having a heart attack, right? You were obviously very ill. Something was wrong. Maybe it was food poisoning. Maybe it was something else. Maybe you were out of shape. Either way, it was this pretty extreme reaction. And you're like, you know what? I oughta, being the good, American middle-aged-ish person, ought to be able to hop right back on my bike and keep going. I'm just going to be hard on myself and keep going.
Let's take a quick break.
Hey everybody, this is Melissa with the Fully Mindful. It's the new year, and I bet you're feeling the need to unlock your full potential and embrace empowerment, or maybe something completely different. Well, I'm excited to offer a new program with one-on-one breathwork and coaching sessions. We'll embark on a truly transformative journey of self-discovery, combining conscious, connected breathwork and embodiment coaching, and more. So contact me, Melissa, at the Fully Mindful, for your transformative session today.
What really happens to us when we die? There is growing evidence that suggests we never really die, but that our eternal souls take a journey from this earthly plane to the afterlife over and over again. Join me, Kristen Taylor, host of How I Made It Through, as I interview psychic mediums and those who have had near-death experiences, as they share insights about why we are here and what we can expect when we transition to the afterlife.
Yeah, not a thing. I've got this. I've got food poisoning. I'm out of shape. I'm too old. I can figure it out. I can muscle through and press on and do all this. So luckily for me, all three of my friends shook their heads and said, no way, no one's a hero. Something's wrong. You're not yourself right now. I felt horribly guilty that I was interrupting the ride that everyone was looking forward to. It was a quintessentially beautiful October morning here in Marin, hardly a cloud in the sky. I mean, just picturesque day. Perfect day for a mountain bike ride. And yet here I was, the guy who was getting sick and holding everybody up. What we did do is we agreed to go down, but not the same way we came up. And so we took a different way home on our way downhill. And all of a sudden I started to get this pain in my chest, awful pain. And I was shifting around on my bike seat, trying to move my body around, thinking it might be a burp or acid reflux or something. And it was so bad that I actually got off my bike again, laid spread eagle across the trail, and started to pound my chest with my fists, a little bit like King Kong or something like that. And just thinking if I hit my chest hard enough, I could evacuate this pain in my chest, like it would be a big old burp or something. But the pain never went away. I was able to get back on my bike. To this point, I have absolutely no idea what's happening to me. I think, again, I'm a fat old man, or I have food poisoning, or just something weird, but not what was really
just
happening.
buck up, Adrian. You gotta
buck up, little camper. You got the, like, what is wrong with you? You can do this. It's not a thing. I got back on my bike, rode a bit longer, and at that point I had to get off my bike again because I started to get another wave of nausea and vomiting. And at this point, I had to confess to my friends who we're all riding together still. I had to confess to them I could no longer control the bike. Like it was too much for me to ride the bike. So one of my friends took off down the hill to go get his car. He lived nearby, to get his car at the base of the trail. And the other two friends walked my bike down, and I just walked myself down. And that walk took 40 minutes. Towards the bottom where my friend had the car, now the ring and pinky fingers in both my hands went numb, as if I had slept on my hands funny or something. Like they started to tingle and couldn't feel them. Like just a very strange sensation. At that point, the thought crossed my mind that something's not right, but it wasn't the thought that oh my God, you're having a heart attack. That wasn't at all on my mind. I still thought it was food poisoning or something. My friend threw me in his car and raced to the hospital, which you would know as Marin General Hospital.
Yeah.
To go there, he drove right by my house, literally right next to my house. And I begged for him to stop and just let me get out. My kids were home alone. My wife was in Colorado for a work event, a project she was working on. And I didn't have my wallet with me, didn't have my insurance card. And I begged him, I said, please drop me off at home. Please let me out of the car. And he said, no, you need help right away. And I'm wheezing. My chest hurt so much. It was so painful. Something wasn't right, but I still wanted to go home. I didn't want to go to the hospital. And I told him, I said, listen, I will take a Pepto-Bismol. I'll drink some Alka-Seltzer, sip some water. I'm going to be fine. And he said, no way. You need help. I'm taking you to the hospital.
Yeah.
And thank goodness he did. I walked into the emergency room there. I said, my name is Adrian Jones. I'm 46 years old. My chest hurts and I'm having trouble breathing. And I got to tell you, that is the fastest way to get treatment in the emergency.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
They wasted no time. There was a nurse with a gurney for me in what felt like a nanosecond. I was able to climb onto the gurney, and he moved me into the emergency room, where they took me into a side area where they attached leads to my chest to do an EKG to measure my heart rhythms. I'm talking to the technicians as they're doing this. I'm trying to explain to them through wheezing and painful breaths that I have food poisoning. They wanted none of it. They didn't even make eye contact with me. They were looking at the EKG readouts that were on the monitor. They whispered something to each other, didn't make eye contact. I'm still trying to tell them that I have food poisoning. They ripped the leads off my chest and whisked me further into the emergency room, where nurses swung blue curtains around me, and I was by myself with a bunch of nurses. They started stabbing my arms with IV lines, putting oxygen reading meters on the tips of my fingers. Then a nurse came in and put a defibrillator on my chest. And at that point, I was looking at my mortality jumped in front of me.
Yeah. Would you think all that stuff before? I mean, in part, it's, the culture that we grow up in of like, oh, we can take care of this all on our own. We're okay. I don't want to be a burden on anyone. I just need to take care of myself. And then plus the denial of like, I don't want to believe that there is something that's really wrong with me. Like, do you think that played a part, or?
Yeah, I think it did. I think, to your point, both things. Like, I can press on, I can do this, and I'm too young. I'm too healthy that anything serious would be happening to me.
Yeah.
No, I ride my bike. I had been doing yoga. I eat pretty well. I thought I took care of myself reasonably well. So no, nothing major would be happening to me. Yet when they put the defibrillator on the chest, it was like I knew at that point, oh boy. And right after they did that, a cardiologist walked into a little area there in the emergency room and said, Mr. Jones, I'm the cardiologist on staff today. I'm here to tell you you're having a heart attack.
Oh, wow.
It was real. It was very real. And the only thought I had was, I'm so glad I'm in a hospital. Like, somehow I got off that mountain and I'm here and I'm in a place of care. I think I'm going to be okay. I hope I'm going to be okay. But it wasn't without those thoughts of mortality. Like, maybe it was present on the brain that maybe I don't make it. Maybe this is it. Maybe they're not able to put an end to my condition, whatever was causing the blockage.
And I wonder, if you go back to that time when you think about that, like when that occurred to you that this could be it, you hope not, but, and you're certainly in the right place. But if this is it, like what went through your mind, what went through your body and your soul?
It didn't. I didn't have a, this is it. I somehow just hadn't. I didn't have that fear and panic. I don't know how else to describe it. I felt my mortality. It was shocking. It was intimidating. I didn't feel that. I felt hope, strangely. And, to put a finer point on it, when I was able to put some markings on, they presented me with two forms. One was a waiver to do open heart surgery. The other was to do a stent operation. I was so weak, but I was able to mark the forms, and I couldn't even sign the forms, but just a scratch of the tip of the pen across the page was sufficient for them to say, okay, we acknowledge that he acknowledges that we're going to do a procedure on him.
Yeah.
They ran with me down to the cath lab, which is where heart procedures are done. As they're running down the hall, I had three thoughts. And my first thought was, I don't want to fly home. I don't want my wife to fly home a widow. I don't want to put this at Liz's, my wife is Liz. I don't want to put this at her feet. This is not my time to say goodbye. My next thought was, why did I run out of the house to go mountain biking and not tell my kids that I love them? And I vowed in that instant that, should I survive, when I say goodbye to my kids now, as trivial as it may seem, I'm going to tell them I love them. Because if that's the last words they hear from me, I want it to be, I love you. And then my third thought was, this is not going to go down today. I'm going to walk out of this hospital of my own 2 feet, of my own volition. That is what's going to happen. I'm grateful for that thought, because it steeled me. I think it rallied my reserve to fight on through what was happening to me. So after I had that third thought, they crashed into the cath lab, pushed open the doors, swung me onto the operating table. And what turns out to be about 45 minutes, they went up through my arm and did angioplasty to open up my left anterior descending, AKA the widowmaker artery, and placed a stent in there. And when I was on that operating table, I found out after the fact, that artery was 100% blocked by a plaque rupture. So something on that climb that I was just doing earlier that morning triggered some sort of rupture of plaque in that artery that all collected when this artery takes a turn over your heart. And that mortality rate just gives me shivers to think about. So when I say I'm really lucky to be here, and I'm grateful to be here, I truly am.
Yeah, I mean, that's remarkable. I wonder, if that third thought that you had about the certainty that you were walking out of this hospital of your own volition on your own 2 feet, if that was like a typical thought for you. Obviously you hadn't had a heart attack before, but was it typical for you to have that kind of resolve about something that was going to happen to you or because of you?
That's a great question. It was definitely not a typical thought. Somehow I rallied to the moment. I had the thought, I had the nerves, I had the conviction to have the fortitude in that moment. And I don't know where it came from, but it came from deep within for me to make it through, to survive. Like I've got fight in me. And maybe I proved something to myself in that moment too, that I didn't know I had within me. But it I don't want to say it surprised me, but it was very natural, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it was maybe not typical for you in the past, but at the same time, it came from deep within you and seemed a natural part of you. And maybe it came out of that love that you were sensing in the, those first two thoughts of, I don't want my wife to fly home a widow, and oh my God, I need to say I love you to my children every single time I leave them. And maybe, I don't know, what's your thought on this, that like maybe those first two thoughts kind of gave you the resolve
Probably
to have that third.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think they did lead up to that third thought. It was sort of this crescendo, this wave, like Liz isn't going to fly home a widow. I'm going to see my kids and tell them I love them again. This
Yeah.
is not happening. I am walking out of this hospital, damn it. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's just how it went.
And so they did a procedure, I'm assuming.
Yep. Yep. Did the procedure, got the stent. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, at this point, I'm assuming your friend is still somewhere in the waiting room,
Mm-hmm.
what, doing all the things that friends do, maybe calling your family or
Yep.
doing
Exactly.
these.
Calling Liz, letting her know
Yeah.
what was going on, and making sure that I was okay. If he needed to do something or be someplace or make a phone call, he's a guardian angel of mine, no doubt. Saved my life, saved my bacon.
Yeah, I definitely get that sense. I mean, all three of your friends for sure. It's so easy to, in those moments, and I've probably been in them myself, where, you're with someone and you're on, like you said, this beautiful epic day. It's a perfect day for a mountain bike ride, shaver grade, awesome trail, Mount Tam, amazing. It would have been easy for one of those friends to say, "Oh, I'm sure you're fine. Sure, we'll let you you seem to be getting down the mountain okay. Just, go on right ahead." And thank God your friends are good friends and, you know, didn't
Yeah.
let that happen.
Yeah. I can't imagine if they had said, well, you look good, after I got done being sick and
Yeah.
throwing up all over the place. If they said, yeah, let's continue the climb. I'm not sure would make it down the mountain. I don't think so.
Yeah. I mean, cautionary tale for people who are active like us out there. And, my own cautionary tale happened recently where it's not lost on me. I was climbing a mountain here called Mount Defiance, and it's beautiful in the gorge area, Columbia Gorge area of Oregon. And it was a training hike for my friends and I to climb Mount St. Helens, which I was really looking forward to and I'd never done. And it's like this epic climb, and you really have to be prepared. There's a lot of snow, et cetera. So Mount Defiance is a very good climb. I think it's up to 5,000 feet, so taller than Mount Tam, and pretty steep at times and snowy in other parts. And without getting into all of my details, because we're here for your story, but I didn't listen to my body. Now, I didn't have a heart attack, thankfully, but I didn't listen. I was hurting. It wasn't working for me. I should have turned around. I didn't want the same kind of thing. I did not want to disappoint my friends. They were here for this climb. It was made clear we're all sticking together because that's what we do. And I didn't turn around, and I ended up getting, pretty hurt because my body wasn't stable, and I slid into a tree well, and anyway, hurt my hip, and then had 7 miles to hike in a very steep elevation. And I've been hurting ever since, and I was not able to do my, St. Helens hike. Woe is me. But, pain is real. But the cautionary tale is, listen, like, we need to be listening to our bodies and not assuming that we can just power through. Like, it's okay to have, I don't even think this is the right word, weakness. I'm using air quotes. It's okay for that. And our friends are happy to stop and help us take care of ourselves, as your story, exemplifies. And I'm sure my friends would have been happy too had I said anything, right? So,
right.
I just didn't listen to myself. And then, here's the other caution: is go with people. It's so important. We love always to go on these things on our own. And I'm not saying it's unsafe, all the time, but it sure is nice for these unfortunate occurrences, when they happen, to have people around to help us. And if not, maybe have a tool, whether that's, my husband takes I forget what it's called, a Garmin with him, and it's an emergency. So if he's out there by himself, he's got something to push that lets people know where he is and what's going on. So Sorry, I was just going to interject your incredible story with, those cautionary tales that I'm hearing from your story, right? Like you are alive because your friends took care of you. And, a miracle of medicine, of course,
Yes.
right? Of
Yes.
course, not
Yes.
to suggest that the doctors didn't have anything to do with it, but like you wouldn't have even been to the hospital had your friends, not intervened in the way that they did.
Exactly. Exactly. And I play it back in my mind that those are all fantastic points, and I'm glad you reiterated them. I don't know, as I play it all back, if my friend was playing the role of me and I was playing the role of him, if they were begging for me to take them home, before this all happened, I would have taken them home. I would have said, yeah, I got my friend home, made sure he got inside okay, made sure everything was okay, and I left him. What a great friend I am. But to have a friend who was like, no, like, you need help. I'm going to override your pleas to be dropped off at home. I am, get you to that ER room, come hell or high water. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. And my other two friends who are so gracious to the guy who took me to the hospital, but it's like, no, guys, as you've so greatly picked up on, is when I was throwing up, none of them said, let's keep going. None of them tried to argue with each other. They were all like, something is wrong. We should go down.
Yeah.
And that saved my life.
The Fully Mindful podcast explores what it is to be fully mindful and present in our everyday lives, uncover our worth, and discover our purposes. I'm Melissa Chareau, the host of The Fully Mindful. I'm a neurodivergent lawyer, mindfulness teacher, and embodiment and breathwork coach. On The Fully Mindful, I interview inspiring creatives, wellness leaders, and social disruptors about how they have discovered their purpose or purposes and live a mindful and connected life. Every other episode, I also offer mindfulness and somatic practices that work for everyday people doing everyday things so that we can thrive and be present for the people and causes we care the most about. Find me at The Fully Mindful on all the places that you listen to your podcasts.
Well, no, I'll challenge you on I don't know if I would have, not dropped off my friend at his house. I bet you he sensed something. We all have this sixth sense in us. And I bet you would have had it too, like, no, that doesn't feel right. Like, we got to keep going. So, it's another, I guess, admonition of like, listen to your gut, listen to your sixth sense when stuff like that's happening. If it doesn't feel right, it's because it's not right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when your friends, they're wheezing and laboring to breathe and being nauseous and sick, all sorts of red flags should be going off.
Yeah. So you have this procedure.
Yeah.
How long are you in the hospital?
I was in for 3 days, 2 nights and 3 days. I have to tell you that one of the most amazing things that helped me get onto my journey of purpose and life-changing actions was they wheeled me post-surgery. They wheeled me into the ICU of the cardiac recovery wing. They hooked me up to all the various monitors and put IVs in my arms again and all those things. When they were adequately comfortable that I was stable, they left the hospital room and left me to my own devices. And it was at that immediate point when the last nurse walked out that I heard a voice in my right ear that said, find your birth parents.
Yeah.
I'm adopted. And it was in that moment. And I don't know how to fact check it, but it was so clear. I sort of looked over my right shoulder to see if someone else was in the room. There wasn't. It was just me and this thought, find your birth parents. And in that moment, I knew at 46 years old that I was going to strike out and find my biological family, that I almost checked out of here. And maybe they wanted to know how I turned out after all. Then I also quickly rationalized, oh my gosh, this might be genetic. I survived this for now. I need to find out if this runs in the family for me, but also for my children and their children, to see what else might be in the genes. And then the third thought I had on this was, oh, I might actually have siblings out there. Maybe they want something to do with me and would want me in their lives. Wouldn't that be pretty cool? So it was super powerful. I knew right then and there, this is what I was going to do. For 46 years, I knew I was adopted, but I never contemplated a search. I wondered about it from time to time, what my biological family was like, but it was never something that would ever compelled me to search. Just wondering thoughts growing up over the years. But here in the bed, in the recovery room, this is what I knew I was going to do. And I didn't know how I was going to do it, but it was going to happen.
So it's not like you were like Mr. 23andMe and Ancestry.com. You had no idea how this is going to happen, but you just knew, you heard that voice that this is something that you had to do. So when you get out of the hospital, I mean, what did you do then?
Yeah. So as fate would have it, I was discharged from the hospital on October 10th, 2016, which is an important date for me. That's my birthday. So I was born in that hospital 47 years earlier. So I thought that was a really strange coincidence that as I walked out of and I did walk out of the hospital on my own 2 feet of my own volition. I did decline the use of a wheelchair. It doesn't make me better than it. I did close the loop on that. As I walked out of the hospital, I thought, wow, this is so weird. I've lived across the country. I've actually lived internationally in Brussels and Hong Kong, stories for another time. But yet I end up in the same hospital in which I was born, and I'm walking out of here as a new person. So sort of like Adrian 2.0 was walking out of the hospital on his birthday. But to your point, I went home and just was in full recovery mode. I went on leave from work. I started working with a nutritionist on my diet. I started doing cardiac rehab, which is a 3-month-long program that cardiac care patients are recommended to go into to rebuild your physical and psychological strength by steadily increasing your workouts on aerobic machines like treadmills and exercise bikes or rowing machines, or you name it, where you're closely monitored every minute of the time you're in there. And so it's a pretty comprehensive program, and one I highly recommend to people if they're in a similar situation. Did wonders for me. I would say about 6 weeks into all of this post heart attack, I went to my very first social event, a fundraiser for our local school foundation, and I ran into a couple. And I knew them loosely just through our community, but not well. And the wife of the couple zeroed in on me, said, Adrian, we heard so much about your heart attack. What happened? I gave him the story about mountain biking. And she leans into me, looks at me a little closer and says, well, is this genetic? And I replied to her, said, I don't know, I'm adopted. And her eyes got really big. And she leaned into me a little bit more and said, well, where were you born? I said, just down the road at Marin General Hospital. And she said, well, what's your birthday? I gave her my birthday, October 10th, 69. And I was wondering, why is she asking me all these questions? It seemed like a lot for someone I don't know. And then that was the end of our conversation. People came in and sort of broke up our chat as it happens at parties and social events and things. Later that night, she comes up to me and shows me her phone and puts it in front of my face. And on the screen of her iPhone is a table of all the babies born in Marin County on October 10th, 1969. And it lists 5 babies. 4 out of the 5 have traditional names like John Doe, Jane Smith, whatever. Mm-hmm. There was one listing that just listed the last names of the biological parents. And she's showing me all this and explaining it to me. And I'm like, I don't know what you're showing me. Like, we're in the middle of a party. Like, I don't know. I need.
How do you have this even?
How do you have this? Like, can you email this to me tomorrow? Like, I'm yeah. I don't know what's going on. So she sends this to me the next day, and so summarizes everything and said, these This is how California records the birth of children of unwed parents when they just have the last names of the biological parents listed. And she said, supposedly, maybe, possibly, these could be the last names of your biological parents. We don't know anything yet, but maybe. Well, that's weird. And in the end of her email she asked me, would you like to find out more? And I replied, absolutely. When can we meet? So we met a couple days later and went for a walk here in town. And turns out she tells me that she's a genetic genealogist and she helps adoptees find their biological family members. And would I like her help? I said, yeah, incredible. I had no idea where I was going to start my search. I figured I would just Google it, and wherever Google took me, I would go. But here I have a genetic genealogist, and this is what she does for a living, and she offered her help. And how does this happen? So I said, I'd love your help. And what we did know is that the last name of my biological mother was Kyle, Kyle, and the last name of the biological father was Kelly, as provided on this document. So we're on this walk, and her name is Christina. Christina asked me, what do you know about your biological parents? And I told her, well, I don't know much, but what I think I know is my biological mother was of Norwegian descent, had brothers, and was Catholic. That's what I know. She goes, great, ton of information. I'm like, really? Okay.
Okay.
All right. And she goes, what do you know about your biological father? I said, I don't know much. I think he was a title officer for a real estate title officer for a title company. And she goes, great, we can work with that. So we continued our walk and got back to her car, and she had an ancestry kit waiting for me. And she opened it up and gave me the vial to spit into. And I followed the instructions there and gave her back the vial. And she packaged it all up. And she says, great, I'm going to submit this or mail it in rather, and we'll see what happens. And I drove home wondering what the heck I'd just done. Like, I had given some woman I barely knew, even though she was a genetic genealogist, I just gave her my DNA and just handed it to her. Like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
But by the time I arrived in the driveway, I rationalized the world is sending you signals. Lean into the universe right now. Who knows where it's going to take you? So I felt better when I walked into the house after my meeting with Christina. And 2 days later, she sends me a text. She says, I want to show you something. Where are you? And I said, I'm near your house. So I drove over to her place. Now I know where she lives. And now we're on text messaging. We're off of email, moved to text. Anyways, she sits me down at her kitchen table and she says, I've been doing some research. I said, okay. She said, I've been using the last name Kyle of this person's birth mother, maybe your birth mother. It's a unique last name. And I searched all the records of the San Francisco Bay Area. I looked at Marin County, Alameda County, San Francisco County, Contra Costa County, looking for women of childbearing age with the last name Kyle. And she said, I found two. First, however, gave birth to a child in September of the year you were born. I was born in October of 69. So that eliminated that candidate. And then she said, but there was one other woman. Can you guess where she lived? I said, no. And she said, just take a wild guess. I'm like, I don't know. You tell me. She said, all right, Marin County. Okay. And she goes, can you guess what town? No, I don't know what town. And she said, San Anselmo, which gave me shivers to my core because that's the town that my wife and I moved to in 2006.
Yeah.
So now my world is starting to get weird and I'm getting all sorts of visceral, emotional things are starting to happen from within. My stomach's starting to get a little queasy. I'm getting some goosebumps, hair standing on the back of my neck. Like, well, that's weird. And she said, yeah. And I did some research on this woman. Her name was Sharon Kyle. And she had grandparents that had come over from Norway into the Minneapolis area and then had moved their way down to Northern California. Okay. That checked off that she was, I knew she was Norwegian. And then Christina said, and I can see on the phone book records from that year, your birth year, that she had two brothers in the house. In those days, they would list everybody that lived in the house. So that checked off. This woman had brothers. Norwegian had brothers. So then she said, this woman was 24 years old in 1969. And I rolled her age back. to when she would have been 18 years old to see if she went to one of the local high schools in southern Marin County. So she started looking through yearbooks, which are public records, which I didn't realize, looking for a woman named Sharon Kyle, who would have graduated from one of the local high schools. So that would have been, and these will probably ring a bell for you, Redwood High School, Tam High School, what was used to be known as Drake High School, now Archie Williams, San Rafael. Couldn't find anyone, no hits whatsoever. And then she turns to me, as she's explaining all this, she says to me, but then I remembered you said your mother was Catholic. Oh no. Now I start really freaking out. I'm like bracing myself for what I think is coming, which ultimately arrived. Is she said, I looked at Marin Catholic, which is the only Catholic high school in Marin County, and I found a Sharon Kyle who graduated class of 1962. That was it. I freaked out. I lost it because my daughter was 2 months into her freshman year at this very same Catholic high school and was unwittingly walking under her paternal biological grandmother's picture in the administrative building hallway.
Wow.
I don't know how any of that happens. I don't know how you walk out of the same hospital in which you're born on your birthday. And I don't get that part. And like, then I meet Christina, who was presented to me in a social environment. Then she does this crazy amount of research. And then to find a woman that lived in San Anselmo, and I did, and then went to Marin Catholic, where my daughter was already a student. Holy cow. I was so emotionally moved and charged that it was all I could do to walk out of her house with my, what held together. I was just like losing it, like trying to just have my composure as I walked out of her house. I got in the car and I just started crying. I'm like, so many emotions were coming through me. And we didn't know that this person, we didn't have genetic proof. But as I walked out of the house, Christina showed me a picture of her. And it was a sophomore year high school picture, and said, what do you think of this photograph? And that was it. That's when I knew this was her. I jumped up and said, that's her. I've been looking in that face in the mirror for 47 years. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I'm looking at the face of my biological mother. I drove home. I knew it. We didn't, DNA was still being processed by Ancestry, but I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that Christina had found my biological mother, Sharon. And it's not too long thereafter that she sends me a text, probably 2-3 weeks later. She sends me a text and says, are you sitting down? I said, yeah. And she sends me a picture. Now, she's looking for my biological father now, and she's got a last name Kelly and a job title of, which I loosely had, of being a title officer. So she's looking through the microfiche at the local libraries or whatever, looking for someone with the last name Kelly who's a title officer, looking at obituaries, hiring announcements, marriage announcements, anything she could find in any of the local newspapers. Eventually, she landed on a guy named Ron Kelly, and she sent me a picture. She sent a text of his senior year high school photo. And I knew, boom, right there. That's him. That's my jawline. That's my nose. That's got to be my biological dad. That was in late November of 2016. By mid-December of 2016, DNA came back from Ancestry, and I had DNA into both families for Ron and for Sharon. So not only without DNA did we find them, and I knew without a doubt that Christina had found them, but DNA came and was the ultimate smoking gun. And there we were. These are my biological parents.
Yeah. Now you need to decide, what are you going to do with that information?
What do you do? Like, you sit on it? I mean, that's, to be perfectly honest, it's a really interesting point you make, because as part of the process, at this stage, I got my ancestry DNA back, which I just said pointed me into both of these families, or linked me into these families. But I also got my ethnicity. So for the first time in my life, I really knew my ethnicity, other than what was loosely a Norwegian biological mother and not a whole lot about my biological father. And then now I had a really good sense of my ethnicity, which was really interesting. And I knew who my family was. And we found out that I had two paternal sisters by doing a lot of sleuthing on Facebook and Ancestry. We were able to find two biological sisters on paternal side and one on my maternal side. So I had sisters. I was so excited I had sisters. But what do you do with this information? Do you reach out? Do you sit on it? What's the playbook? Well, there really isn't a playbook. And so I knew I was going to reach out. I was hell bent on going all full steam ahead. I just didn't know what that outreach process would look like. Eventually I landed, do you call them? Do you show up at their doorstep? Do you send them a message through Facebook? Like, what's protocol? Yeah, right. And so what I landed on was sending them letters that would arrive the exact same day. So I would surrender myself to fate. I would write letters and deliver them and put the ball in their respective courts and see what happened. And I thought that would be very respectful. It would give them time to process. I don't know what their spouses knew about me. I don't know what their respective daughters knew of me. I just figured I'd send them a letter through FedEx and see what happened. So that's what I did in late January of 2017 as I dropped the letters in the mail, 2-day delivery. And 5 days after that, I got an email with the subject line, "Thank you," from Sharon.
Mm.
And she, in this email, indicated she'd never changed her last name in the hopes that I would come find her. In the letter, she talked about her daughter and her 3 grandchildren that she has. Of course, I knew all this because Facebook is an extraordinarily good place to do sleuthing about biological members. I hate to admit it, but Christine and I found out an awful lot about them. We wanted to know what we were getting into and what apple cart we could potentially be upsetting. We exchanged emails that night. We talked the next day, and hearing her voice for the first time was like, I don't know. It's really hard to describe because it was a voice I recognized, but it was new to me, and it's very hard to describe. Very comforting. I felt 100% at ease when I heard her voice, but it was also very unsettling to be talking to your biological mother for the first time too. Very, very strange panoply of emotions that I was feeling at the time, but all good, and a sense of warmth in our conversation. And she told me, I finally, for the first time in my life, heard the story of how I came to be. I found out that she and my biological father had been engaged, and that when she had become pregnant during their engagement with me and came to the realization that that wasn't the right arrangement for her, and that she felt that she did not want to marry him, and that she wanted to place me up for adoption with going back into the late 60s, there weren't a lot of choices, and put me up for adoption with a couple that could provide me a loving household and a safe environment in which to grow up. So we had this great conversation, and we agreed we'd see each other in a couple of days over in Berkeley at the Claremont Hotel and Spa, which you may remember. As we were hanging up the phone, I wanted to end our conversation on a high note. And I said, "Well, Sharon, I look forward to seeing you again." And she said to me, deadpan, she goes, "I've never seen you." I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, in those days, when it was an adoption situation, they sedate the birth mother." And I don't know how that works, but she was sedated and delivered me. And she said, as she kept going, and she said, I never saw you, but your grandmother was there. And when I came to, she was sitting next to me, and she said she got to hold you. And she said, you had the face of an angel. Whether or not I do, I don't think so. But that's what Sharon had to hold on to, was what her mother had shared with her, that she had a baby boy and that it was had the face of an angel. So that's what she was holding on to for so many years, until I sent her that letter. So very, very powerful. And we met 2 days later at the Claremont Hotel. And first thing we did is have a massive embrace of a hug, where we, time and space just vanished. It was melted into whatever, the ether, It was just the two of us in this very busy hotel lobby having this enormous hug, making up for 47 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. We stayed in the hotel for 6 hours talking. There was crying, there were tears, there was laughter, there was a little bit of everything, but had got a strong start in making up for lost time. It was very clear that she was very interested in getting to know me and having a relationship. I too with her. And we got off to what will be a pretty famous start, if I put it that way.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so I don't want to skip any important bits, but and I don't know if your adopted family was still alive at this point, if they knew what was going on. Yeah.
Yeah. The day that after the party where I met Christina, I called my sister, the one I grew up with, and told her everything at that point, and said, before I go any further, I need your support. If you're in my camp, my side of the ring, my corner of the ring rather, great. That gives me all I need to go forward. And she goes, I support you, bro. And then I called my parents and told them everything, and they were very supportive. Now, we growing up had those conversations periodically as we got older about finding our biological parents. They were very supportive, but I think hearing the news for me that here we are, it's game on, I've got a genetic genealogist and we're doing the search, it caught them off guard. And I hated not doing it in person, rather having a phone call with them, but I felt duplicitous going any further into the process without bringing them up to speed and bringing them in and getting them involved.
Yeah.
So I know they were tender in the early days, a few years ago now, things have changed, but in the early days, especially for my mom, it was tricky. It was hard.
I'm sure. Yeah.
And I didn't love that. I didn't love that they felt that way and put them in an awkward position. But at the same time, I had to do what I needed to do for me. And as that voice spoke in my ear and gave me that ever powerful ultimatum, I had to find my biological family. So I found them, got in touch with my biological mother. I found out that heart disease runs in the family pretty significantly. It's a bit of a serial killer in the maternal line, taking out people in their 50s and 60s pretty regularly. So that was, I guess, news I needed to hear. Or not, I wasn't excited about it, but it's the truth. Would have liked to have known that 20, 30 years ago. I don't know what younger me would have done with that information, but maybe I would have taken different precautions or made different lifestyle decisions. I don't know. But anyways, here I knew. And so Sharon and I started to see each other periodically. It turns out she had told her husband about me, but they had never told her daughter. And so that was something she needed to do. And I said, take your time. I'll be on your timetable for when you do that, but I need to meet her. She is my blood. She is my sister, and I'd like to meet her. She goes, you'll meet her. I'll get you connected. It just might take a while. I said, I'm on your timetable. I just need to meet her at some stage. And you might be wondering what was going on with Ron. Ron, I had not heard from him. It had been a few weeks, and I was wrestling with what to do. Do I send him another letter? I mean, I knew his address. Obviously, I sent him a letter. I could go by his house, knock on his door. Like, I don't know. What do I do? And it so turns out that he had two daughters, and through the powers of hardcore Facebook sleuthing and connecting dots, Christina and I were able to figure out that his oldest daughter had dated the first cousin of a friend of mine who lives in my town, who I know fairly well. I'm like, are you absolutely kidding me? So I approach this friend, I sit him down, I tell him everything I've shared to this point, and I show him a picture of this sister named Katie. And he goes, wait, that's Katie? He goes, you know Katie? You're telling me Katie's your sister? I'm like, yes, I want to meet her. He goes, You've never met her? I said, no, I'm dying to meet her. What do I do? I haven't heard from her dad. He goes, hold on. I'll stop you right there. She is the most open-minded, loving person. I think she would embrace hearing from you and greet you with open arms. And he goes, just let me know what I can do. I said, you've told me enough. You've given me all the what I needed to hear. It turns out that Katie has her own business. Her email address is on her website. I wrote her an email and just said, I'm an adoptee doing a search for my biological family. We're related. I should let you know that I sent your father a letter. I don't know what he's done with it. I'm just seeking answers, and I hope that we can connect. Here's my Facebook link. Here's my contact information, all this stuff. Well, 4 days later, I met that whole side of the family. We met in Novato here in Marin, and we had this most amazing dinner in March of 2017, and we were off to the races.
Amazing. Amazing.
It's all amazing. There isn't the heart attack without the biological family reunion. There isn't the reunion without the heart attack. They're so intertwined that I have to tell both sides of that story, because I know in our conversation we want to talk about purpose, and what I got out of all of this was an incredible sense of purpose. So on one hand, being a heart attack survivor, I gained what I like to call survivor superpowers: greater gratitude, greater appreciation, greater sense of being in the moment, so much gratitude for my family, for my friends, for my community. I just was this power, this thing that was just so powerful inside of me. There was an awakening or something. Concurrent to that, on the other hand, here I had learned about my ethnicity. I met my biological family. I discovered holes I never knew I had within my soul and in my heart were being filled by virtue of just meeting my biological family and having these really warm, receptive, and embracing relationships all pretty much right out of the gates. That just gave me, so I'm feeling like a new person on both sides of this, the survivor superpowers and having my biological family in my life who embrace me. That's how I landed on this podcast, the sense of profound awesomeness. Like, I knew who I was. I knew that I had finally arrived at the full person I needed to be, which had, unbeknownst to me, been eluding me for so long. And now I had this great gift and I discovered it. And now I had this sense of purpose and this greater sense of meaning and why I'm here and what I want to do with this next second half of my life, which has been so powerful.
Yeah, I'm wondering, I'm sure in so many ways, how these survivor superpowers and this incredible reunion with your biological family impacted your relationships with your family, your wife, Liz, your children, your parents, your sister. How did that impact your relationship with them?
Yeah. Liz was very supportive out of the gates. The whole adoption search and reunion, she's like, do what you've got to do. I support you. My kids, I brought them up to speed at family dinners every night. I'd share with them what we'd learned before I'd even reached out to anybody, just what we'd learned on Facebook or on Ancestry or what other social media sites we were looking to see what we could learn. So I brought them along, and they thought, they were what, 12 and 14. Is that right? I think that's right. For them, it was Dad's curious family adventure. They were bemused by it. And they were a little disappointed when I found out that their blood cousins are super duper young and they weren't the same age. They were a little disappointed. And that's like, oh, we don't have kids the same age as us. Well, no, you got to be the cool older cousins when we all get reunited. And then my family, my sister was ever supportive. Thank goodness. My parents, they were tender. They rarely talked about it for a couple of years. I never brought it up. If they asked me questions, then I would talk about it. And now we've gotten to the point, what are we, 6 years into this, where they actually proactively ask me about it when we have phone conversations and chat, whatever. So I know they're in a much better place. And nothing changed. As I said to my mom, she was very tender, and there were a few emotional conversations I had with her. And I would try to reiterate, nothing's changing, Mom. I'm still a Jones. You're still Mom. My kids are your grandkids. Like, that doesn't change. I'm just expanding my family. And oh, by the way, Mom, if this works out right, there will be so much more love in my life and in Liz's life and in your grandkids' life. Wouldn't you want that? Isn't that what we want for our families and our children, is to have just surrounded by love and caring? And I think that really helped her. I mean, it was tricky. All this was happening. So yes, I glossed over this, but my biological parents are within an hour's drive of where I live. All three sisters are similarly within an hour's drive. So all this was happening basically in the San Francisco area. And my parents live out in Massachusetts. So for them, they're 3,000 miles away, different time zones. I just felt so far removed. Like things were moving so fast and they weren't a part of it, but they got over it.
Yeah. It sounds like they're supportive. And now this has catapulted you into this profound awesomeness. So tell us about that. What's that about?
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking. I started this podcast. So the podcast was born out of this thing that I gave an affectionate name to, profound awesomeness, because I didn't know how else to describe this feeling that I was describing earlier. Life was just so darn groovy. And I just, how do I call this? And I just came up with profound awesomeness. And basically, I used to, I'm going to go back in time. Just after my heart attack, I would lay in bed and wonder, I would ask, after I got discharged from the hospital and so forth, I would lay in bed, stare at the ceiling and wonder why I survived. Why me? So many people don't survive the Widowmaker. It's a killer. Why did I survive? What am I supposed to do with my life with a second chance? Do I just go back to what I was doing? Like nothing happened? Like it was just a little paper cut? Like, what do I do here? And I sent this question out to my universe, to my God, to see what would happen. And the answer came back pretty resoundingly. It was to use your story to help and inspire people. So I didn't know exactly how that would manifest, but I started to do public speaking. I connected with the Heart Association. I've done a couple talks for them, started to write, started to blog. I blogged for Christina, started my own blog, left corporate America, moved careers around a little bit. But ultimately, I decided in 2021, I love the podcast medium. I think it's a really rich, powerful, intimate medium to connect with people, that I could tell stories. I could help and inspire people by telling stories of other people who've been through tragedies, traumas, calamities, and have come out on the other side triumphantly and living with more meaning and more purpose and more mission-driven lives. And I could share those stories, and maybe that would help people. So that's why I started Profound Awesomeness. It's been a couple of years now, and we're going strong. And I just love telling these stories. And I hope, at a bare minimum, with every episode, if I can affect one person, it's worth it. I can get more than one, that's amazing. But if I can get one, that's pretty cool. We've made a difference.
Yeah, I would wager it's probably a lot more than one. But
I'm going for one. I don't want to, I don't know.
Your bar is low, but
my bar may be too low, but I just want to help people.
I am assuming just, your own story is so inspiring. And I know that you attract guests who have also very different and very interesting and inspiring stories. And I mean, this is the power of being human, is our, telling stories to and with, sharing with one another. That's how we connect as humans. That's how we understand each other. That's how we connect. That's how we help each other, is by the sharing of their stories. So absolutely, the podcast medium is probably, I'm biased, I know, the best medium to do this in, because where else, maybe on NPR, you might hear a story or two, and they had StoryCorps, which is really fabulous and very inspiring project. But generally speaking, you're not going to hear just sort of like everyday people, out there on the radio or on television and whatnot, maybe a couple shows here and there. But this medium is where we really get to connect with regular people, and regular people get to decide what they want to listen to and what they want to be inspired by. And it's just an incredible way of doing that. And that you've been doing that, and you were willing to give up your corporate job. I know that's no easy decision to make, especially when you live in Marin County and the cost of living is rather high. But just giving up a certain job for this dream it seems to me there are no coincidences. You have this amazing story of, this, you happen to be in Marin, you happen to be in California, you lived in all these different places, and you happen to be in Marin, and you happen to be with these particular friends who saved your bacon. You end up in the hospital and discharging on the very day of your birth from the very hospital you were born in with this message. You happen to meet this incredible woman who happens to be available to listen to you, and and on goes your story, right? And there are just like zero coincidences. It's just, my sense is, for whatever it's worth for you and for the listeners, you were absolutely present and available to receive all that was happening. All that stuff happens all the time to all of us all the time. It's just that we're not always in a place where we can see it or sense it. But like, that's the miracle of this experience, this human experience, this connection. All of these things are happening all around us all the time. And sometimes it takes, a pretty cataclysmic event for us to get shaken and start seeing these things. And sometimes, hopefully, most of the time, we can arrive there without that. But I would just invite like people who are listening to this, and maybe people on your podcast, to look for that, to look for those messages, those coincidences, seeming coincidences, because they're happening all the time. And what an enriched and incredible experience in life you've shared with us because you were paying attention.
Yeah, that's super profound. And I agree with you that it does happen all around us. And we just have to pause, open ourselves up. Hard to do with so many demands on our lives and so many things we've got to get done. I mean, getting through the day is hard. It's hard. It's not easy. But to find the space and the grace to allow these messages to come through, you may not see them at first. It may take a while. It may take 2 or 3 tries, but they're happening. And to your point, you've just got to listen and look, and you'll find them.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I'm so grateful for your sharing your story with us here today. If people want to know more, if they want to find your podcast, if they want to find out more about you, how do they do that?
Yeah. Thank you very much for the question. Profound Awesomeness is the podcast. Please check it out. It's wherever you download your podcast. I've got an Instagram page, profound_awesomeness we just launched the Instagram page, got some things up our sleeves for that. And you can go to profoundawesomeness.com, which is a temporary site currently, but you can go there. And if you want to get in touch with me for whatever reason, you have a story you'd like to share on the show, or whatever's on your mind, I'd love to hear from you. You can get in touch with me through profoundawesomeness.com.
Fantastic. I will make sure to put all of that in the show notes too. And really appreciate your sharing all of your profound awesomeness with us today. And I know there's so much more to talk about. So I hope someday in the future we'll have part 2.
I would be excited to have that conversation. Thank you again so much for allowing me to share my story on your show.
Yes, thank you so much.
Hey, everybody, if you like this conversation, make sure to rate the show in Apple or Spotify or wherever you are listening so that others can find it and enjoy it too. And if you like the show and want to keep hearing great conversations with really interesting people about how they found their purpose, please donate to the show. Go to thefullymindful.com to donate today. Hey everybody, it's Melissa, and I'm wondering if you all can relate. Have you ever caught yourself procrastinating or maybe doubting your abilities, or maybe you have a black belt inner critic like I do or have had that wants to sabotage your every move with judgment and perfectionism expectations? It might keep you stuck, it might keep you anxious and away from your full potential. The Positive Intelligence Program, PQ, is a powerful 6-week journey designed to help you quiet those saboteurs, embrace positivity, and find flow in your life. Through daily practices and weekly focuses, we'll work together to build your mental fitness. The PQ app will guide you every step of the way and support you, and you'll be supported either by myself in a one-on-one or in a small group of like-minded individuals where you can share insights and progress. So reach out, contact me at info@thefullymindful.com to find out how we can work together one-on-one or in a small group today.